So I was walking along the river today, and I thought to myself, what could I talk about that I haven't talked about hardly at all? And this is kind of a spiritual topic, so if you're not really into that kind of thing, you may want to skip this one. But I was thinking about, like sometimes when I'm talking about some particular, like my recent video where I'm talking about, say, a journalist or someone who's gone off the rails, like the journalist I was talking about recently, gone off the rails and starts doing grifty stuff and anti-vaxxer stuff and all of that. And I sometimes find, that when I see that particular person's face, it kind of, I feel this sort of anger welling up in me. Probably because, one, I feel there's a betrayal there, and also personally, and a betrayal of the left as well. And also that it's more of a betrayal, it's more of a concerning thing when somebody who seemed to be very much on the left and was an anti-imperialist starts to put out talking points that are helping basically the right wing, helping fascism come into being quicker. And so that really disturbs me, as I'm sure it would disturb you if you're anti-fascist, which I hope you are if you're watching this channel. And so, it's like an even more scary thing when somebody who was on the left and an anti-imperialist starts to put out those right-wing talking points and starts to look like they're grifting to the right. Particularly, if you've admired them and you've bought their books and all of this sort of thing. So, and I don't really like feeling like that about, I don't really like feeling that way, angry or anything, or sort of where somebody sort of really makes me feel almost a bit sick in my stomach because I'm sort of so upset with them. I don't like feeling like that. And it's hard to, I find it's a bit disturbing about myself because I try to not, I try to, get annoyed at someone's actions, not at the person themselves, because unfortunately they're in the grips of something, whatever that is, either some kind of ignorance or some kind of, need for something, and that's the way they want to get it. Maybe it's money, maybe it's their ego. They want more attention. Who knows? I can't really guess the motivations of people. I'm not inside their head. But I try not to sort of, hate the person kind of thing. And I can't really even say that I hate that particular journalist that's been, who I feel has been kind of on a trajectory that is sort of a bit ominous. I feel. I can't hate them, but I certainly have this kind of a bit of revulsion when I see their face, which is kind of sad because, say 3 years ago, if they were doing a live stream on their, sort of journalist outlet, it's almost like hen's teeth. 3 years ago, they were hardly, or 4 years ago, they were hardly on the scene online. Occasionally they do a video with someone, an interview, but it was very rare. Then they suddenly, when they started becoming an anti-vaxxer, they were on all the time online. So at one point it was like hen's teeth, if you can use that old saying. They would be there occasionally and I'd sort of rush to it, and other people would do that too. They'd rush to see that particular interview or that live stream. And now basically I unsubscribe from that particular journalism source, and I don't feel, I feel the opposite to that. I only go and look at some of their stuff to sort of find out what they're up to, but I really don't like looking at their stuff anymore. That, to me, I feel sad about that. And also, I remember ages ago, well, when I say ages ago, it wasn't that long ago, really, but about 12 years ago, when we had adopted this young cat, and it looked as if someone had tried to harm our cat, and I felt, and I wasn't exactly sure who it was, but I had a very sort of a good idea who that person was, and it was hard for a little while not to want to. I mean, I felt, very angry toward that particular person, that particular man, and we basically told him, to never sort of come around our place again. This was up north of Tasmania. We never wanted to hear from him again. But there was this part of me was so inside, I could feel it kind of gnawing away. I almost felt like, sometimes you just get this need. Sometimes it's almost like this physical need. In your mind, you almost want to, sort of physically harm, not in a in a serious way, but like, I don't know, something. You know what I mean? There's this sort of, because it's like particularly if you're vegan, non-human animals, and when they're in your care and they're like family members. So when somebody tries to, when they've tried to harm that particular cat, it's like any sort of family member, you're kind of appalled. And unfortunately, of course, it doesn't matter in this society that if somebody happened to kill the cat or dog whom you lived with, they probably there wouldn't be much in the way of. There'd probably be a slap on the wrist, and if they're lucky, a fine. It wouldn't be such a big deal. That's because animals are property, and they're not viewed the same way as human beings. They're viewed as property. So people can get away with a lot more when it comes to non-human animals, and that's why we need to be vegan. So animals are no longer viewed as property and things, and viewed as moral persons, which simply means that they're not a thing. So anyway, but that feeling that I was talking about feeling this sort of anger when somebody's tried to harm a sentient being whom I live with, whom I consider a family member, it's something that, at that time I had to suppress, and because I didn't want to go that way, and we managed to remove that person from our life. But it's this, and I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this, but sometimes there are tests, when you're sort of talking about being nonviolent and stuff, there are tests in one's life where you can sort of say to somebody else, or it's easy when it's not affecting you personally to say, to kind of, you think, well, you wouldn't want to hurt somebody, whatever, because they've done some wrong to you. But when it's you and it's someone who somebody has tried to harm, it's a test of whether you walk the walk, basically. And I like to think that I can walk the walk when it comes to something like that, where somebody's tried to harm a non-human animal whom I consider a family member. That I don't, that I try and not hate them and not have harmful feelings towards them. And when I was walking along today, on my walk, I was thinking about Cornel West and why people sort of even on the far right, he gets invited on different shows, shows that you wouldn't expect, like far right shows, etc. And how is it that he manages to basically flow through these different he flows through these different mediums, and nobody and people are always quite respectful towards him. And I think there's only one time where I've actually seen him kind of getting pretty angry with someone, and that was a colleague, it was a black person who was basically selling out black people on a mainstream media, on a corporate media show, and he was very angry with that person. He calmed down and stuff, but it was interesting to see, he was angry at this particular black person. You could probably call them, as the Black Agenda Report referred to that group as the Black Misleadership class. He was getting annoyed with that person, and it was a heated exchange, and this was on corporate media. But Cornel West has this way about him, which is incredible, the equanimity that he displays. It doesn't matter who it is, brother Obama, brother Obama, brother this, sister that. He always, doesn't matter who he's talking to or about, he always refers to them in a respectful manner. Brother Biden, these are all enemies of the left, basically. A lot of these people, a lot of the politicians in the duopoly are all enemies of the left, and I personally think that the Democratic Party is more of an enemy to the left, because it pretends to be doing good things for black people and people of color, and pretends to do these things, but really is not doing at best is not doing anything, and at worst is basically like the crime bill that Biden signed, which ended up causing mass incarceration of black people, that kind of thing. So, but Dr. Cornel West, who, by the way, got sort of, I think, shoved out of Harvard because he was sticking up for Palestinians, which is something that, sticking up for Palestinians, whether it is verboten, because the US, being the empire that it is, uses Israel as a way of, for its proxy wars, and they're in cahoots with one another. It's sort of their partners in crime. And so Cornel West is a friend of Palestinians, which we all should be if we're on the left. And that's a great litmus test for somebody who calls themselves a leftist. If they're not sticking up for Palestinians, one has to wonder why, and one should challenge people who are not doing that. And you know that if you are sticking up for Palestinians on YouTube, even mentioning that word, the algorithms rip through this video, and they recognizes the word Palestinians, and then you're immediately suppressed. Anti-imperialist channels are suppressed anyway, but there are a whole list of words that the algorithms go through the audio and check on. So anyway, Cornel West was pushed out of Harvard, and but he has this incredible equanimity. You've probably noticed how he's just so loving towards people, so loving towards anybody, and nobody is his enemy. Everybody he sees as worthy of love, and he's always very loving when he talks to them. And that is why, that's incredible equanimity, and that is why one of the reasons he's invited on all these. He's an incredible intellect, of course, and he's amazing. But that's one of his equanimity, I think, is one of the reasons why he is invited on all these different shows, including kind of right-wing shows, including Fox News and all of that. And people sort of will, like, for example, Tucker Carlson, who is a white nationalist, he's a racist and a bigot in general. He has Cornel West on and always says, it's always great to have you on, Dr. West, and all that kind of stuff. And Cornel West calls him Brother Tucker or whatever. He's always loving towards anybody. Nobody is his enemy. He's a true Christian, really, basically, because that's what Christianity was supposed to be. But, of course, unfortunately, people project all their, they project all their own discriminations and bigotry and all of that into religions and turn it into something awful. But that's what it's supposed to be. Cornel West is an example of a real Christian who truly does love. He truly walks the walk. He truly does love everybody, even those who he knows are an enemy of the left, who are fascist and all of that. Not that he won't criticize those people, not that he won't stand up against them and all of that, but he still shows love for them. And I prefer, I have to check myself on occasion. I prefer to, I'll get upset when I'm talking about different people on this channel who I feel are selling out the left, or who are making it much, much worse for people of color and black people, etc., who are taking us towards fascism, particularly those who pretend to be leftists and are taking us towards fascism, or they're trying to muddle communism and socialism and trying to make it something that it isn't. It's a whole COINTELPRO sort of thing that's happening with the tax on socialists and all of that. And that's only going to get worse. The more we go towards fascism, which is what end-stage capitalism ends up bringing us to fascism. That's what happens. But I do my best to try and not hate anybody, and even those, when they die, I don't have ugly thoughts about them. I don't believe in a god or in any sort of supernatural being or anything, but I think to myself, well, I don't know if anything happens after you, my idea of after people die, or after any sentient animal, human or non-human, dies, is I sometimes consider that they become a part of the one, like a sort of like an energy, or part of everything kind of thing. That's my kind of thoughts, and with that, of course, is a sort of peace. And that includes anybody who, doesn't matter what they've done in their life. I don't believe in any sort of hell realm or hell or anything like that. And I don't wish that on anybody either, even if they've done awful things. Like I can imagine, I mean, Henry Kissinger just keeps on living on and on and on and on, and other people die, and good people and whatever. He's done awful things and caused so much suffering and death in the world. And I see that he's basically, by being that way, he's robbed himself of any idea of real empathy, which means that he doesn't really understand what real love is. And I see that as in, I don't believe in punishment, but I see that as his ongoing punishment in life, Henry Kissinger, of not ever really experiencing real love because he lacks empathy. And, who knows, he might be a sociopath or a psychopath or whatever, but he lacks empathy. And that is, I think, is a terrible, terrible thing. So, one could actually feel like that is a dreadful thing to be like that most of your life. I don't know what happened to him that he's like that. I don't know if it's some sort of organic problem, neurological problem he has. Who knows? Or that power just ends up corrupting people and literally robs them of empathy. I don't know what it is with him and people like him, but I try not to feel like when he finally dies, like with any other person that's like him, I try not to ever feel sort of a hatred or wishing that they burn in hell or anything like that. I don't see any point to that. It only it only diminishes me to feel like that. It doesn't really help me to feel that kind of anger, as the saying goes. I think it was a Buddhist saying, to hold on to anger is like holding a hot burning coal in your hand. It really just harms yourself. And I believe in that. Of course, I can feel some sort of, I do feel anger about these different individuals that are causing so much harm and have incredible power that they wield, which is so awful and does so much harm and damage to people. But I sort of have good thoughts that if there's any kind of, I don't know, I don't really believe in reincarnation either, but if there was any reincarnation, I'll sort of have this thought like, may they never harm again, May they have peace, but may they never harm again. So if there's any sort of, anything like that, that's what if there's anything like that, any sort of afterlife, which I don't personally think there is, but, I just feel like we go into a sort of a kind of a oneness, with everything, because the energy, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe we're just ashes and worm meat, who knows? It doesn't really matter to me. What matters now is what I'm doing now, what we're doing right now, each and every moment. And I don't know if you've ever read I mentioned this before, any Eckhart Tolle. One day I'll actually talk about that, Eckhart Tolle, and how much his books have meant to me and helped me. It's kind of helped me be more in the moment and not living in the future in my mind or living in the past. It's helped me a great deal, because we need to, in some ways, if we allowed ourselves to worry about everything that could happen in the future, and there's so many things that could happen, fascism, climate collapse, social collapse, all of that kind of thing, starvation, famine, and all of that, widespread because of the climate crisis and all. But we could go into all kinds of things, worrying about the future, and that only creates terrible anxiety. But really, all we have right now is right now, this moment. And if we stop and think, well, what's happening in this moment? Do I have anything to fear right now? There's no sort of person trying to attack me right now. I'm just here, laying on the bed, looking out at this beautiful, looking at the river down out through the window, and the mountains and the beautiful trees. There's nothing happening right now that I need to be afraid of or worried about or be ruminating on. There's nothing. The past, I don't need to be living in the past, unless if I draw up the past, if for some reason I can draw it up if there's a reason to do so, but I don't have to ruminate on the past, so that I don't end up filling myself with guilt of maybe I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that, maybe I should have treated that person better, or maybe I shouldn't have, or all the animals that I've harmed by being non-vegan, all that kind of stuff. I could ruminate on that too. It doesn't mean I'm denying my past or that I'm trying to live in some little bubble to prevent myself from, sort of experiencing things. Like, yes, I allow myself to feel, but when we really look at the what's happening right now, the future is just a series of individual moments, really. So all we have is right now, and that's something that I can't possibly, even though it's a very simple message that Eckhart Tolle puts out in his books, but I'm not going to try and explain it here. But I would encourage people to check them out. If you go on daily walks, maybe sign up to Audible or something, or some audio book thing, and listen to his books. There's a number of them, and I don't agree with every single thing that he says in his books. Like he tends to focus sometimes on, he'll ignore the carnage of capitalism. Sometimes when he'll mention some carnage that was by communists or something, rather than the present carnage and the ongoing carnage of, say, the capitalism or even, say, Christianity or something. But a couple of times he said some things that make me feel a little bit like, that's not quite right. But and there's a few other things, but they're minor things. But on the whole, I'd say 95% of his books. He also mentions the word God sometimes, but he doesn't literally mean some sort of omnipresent, omnipotent God. It's just a word that sometimes he'll throw in there. But he brings in all sorts of different religions, bits and pieces from religions or philosophies or whatever. It's a mixed bag. So he's not focusing on anything, and he also tells people not to get caught up in any particular idea and fixated on any particular person, including himself. He doesn't see himself as any kind of really of necessarily a spiritual teacher. He's more like, he says, everything we have is with us right now. We just have to realize it. That's all. It's not like he's giving us anything or whatever. So don't sort of be put off by thinking that this spiritual teacher thing, that he's sort of some kind of cult-like figure or anything. It's nothing like that. He doesn't present himself that way, and he's not into having centers, and foundations for himself, or he doesn't want people to focus on him as the person. So it's actually, I think you'll find that if you have a look at his books and you maybe go for a walk and listen to them, it's really, really beneficial, particularly in times like this where, we're coming, hopefully, to the end of this pandemic. I hope another one doesn't start straight after. I'd start to wonder what was going on if that was the case. But, it's been a stressful time in particular. And I'm a white person, and I found it stressful. I can't even imagine living in the United States and having how the government abandons people, and they're still abandoning people. And Biden talks about this vaccine as if that's the only answer to everything. Vaccines are very important, but what about the social support and all of that? I can't imagine I don't know how people do it. And, of course, there's far worse things even than that in the rest of the world. And there's poverty and famine and all of that all over the place. I'm in a very privileged position, and I still found it very stressful. So, and stressful in that, the health thing is, we're supported here socially, like in a social, that the government hasn't abandoned the public like it has in the United States, although it would like to, and that's coming, I think, at some point. But that sort of side of things isn't like it is in the United States. Here in Australia, this pandemic thing is still ongoing, and so, but what I'm saying is that even though I'm in a privileged position, I was finding it stressful during this pandemic, because you never really knew what was going to happen, and and you also, then another variant comes up and another variant and all of that, and who knows, if it's going to be the end of this one, who knows. But I found that his books, listening to them on walks and stuff, and eventually, if you do it on a daily basis, at some point, you've really internalized it, and you can find that you are not living in the future in your mind. You're not always thinking about things in the future, and you're not always ruminating on the past. You're actually being present, and if you find yourself drifting off into the future and then you start to get anxious, you can pull yourself back and be in the present again, and it makes life so much more peaceful, and you're so much more present, and really it makes things a lot more real, rather than when you meet people, instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to meet this person. What are they going to be like? Are they going to be like this? Are they going to say this to me? In the past, sometimes I would, if there was somebody that I was apprehensive about meeting, and I'd be thinking, are they going to, this and this and this and this? And I'd end up bringing all this baggage and sort of preconceived ideas when I was talking to people. Even though I may not be bringing it forth in conversation, it's kind of sitting back there and it's clouding my interactions. It's clouding my perception of that person, because I've got this filter of all these different discriminations in some ways, and concerns and worries and all of that. So that's why I bring this book up. That's why I bring up Eckhart Tolle. And some people call him Tolle. I tend to call him Toll and silent E. I don't know. But anyway, that's why I bring him up, because in these very difficult times, these stressful times, where you can see things are moving more and more towards fascism in the United States, and of course it's happening in other Western countries. It's slowly happening here in Australia. When you see that, you kind of know in some ways, unless the real left gets organized and unless we really organize on the ground, away from online, and have socialist and that we're anti-capitalist, unless we actually have those positions, we're going to drift towards fascism, and then we're going to have to deal with that, and it's going to be horrific. So we have to stop that from happening. We have to prevent fascism from happening. And so that's why rather than be worried about this fascism that might be coming, for say in 2024, if Trump gets back in, or a competent fascist, instead of worrying about that, we try and live our life and enjoy what's happening, but we also try and do things and get engaged so that we can try and prevent that from happening. Mutual aid and all of that, we try and do our best to prevent fascism from taking hold. It may actually take hold anyway, but still, we have to fight against it. And so, living in the moment doesn't mean that we don't care about the future and that we just kind of live in a little sort of placating little bubble that and drift around. And it doesn't mean not taking action, but it just means we're not caught up in the terrible stress of thinking of what might happen in the future, or being tied up and constantly in what we've done in the past, which no longer exists. I'm not saying that we don't have some responsibility, and it's important to regret past actions if we've done something that is harmful to somebody, or is human or non-human, but it means that we don't keep persecuting ourselves over it. There's only so much remorse and regret we can have. We can't keep continually persecuting ourselves in our life for things that we can't change anymore. We can only try and make amends through future actions, trying to make amends, either with, if it's not possible to do it with the person or with the non-human, then we try and find ways that will make things better, say, for non-humans, by becoming vegan and spreading veganism to others, so that we have a more peaceful and non-violent planet, and those non-human animals aren't bred into existence to be used as things. And also we care about the non-human animals on the planet, not just because we like to look at them, but because they have their own lives and they deserve a planet to live on that isn't, and where they're not persecuted, trapped, drowned, shot, and all of that. They deserve to have plenty of land for themselves. So there's all these different things. We can try and make amends like that. Try and live a good life. Try and get rid of this awful death machine, capitalism, which we're participating in, which is causing so much destruction and is ecocidal and is anti-people, is anti-non-human and human. So anyway, I don't know how I hope that this made sense. I'm just bringing out some things that I think about every so often, and I wanted to share also some strategies that I have that I found helpful, very helpful really, and that you don't need anybody to, you don't have to seek this outside. You don't have to seek this state. It's here right now in every moment, So, there's nothing you don't have to keep seeking it. You don't even have to sit down and do formal meditation. You can just try and avoid, try and stop thinking about the future and worrying about it. Try and stop ruminating on the past. And as Eckhart Tolle has said in his books, at one point he says, accept the moment as if you chose it. And when you think about that, if something happens to you and it's really, you find it really difficult to deal with right there and then, that resistance actually causes. Now, I'm not saying to not, sort of react and not, if somebody's trying to harm you, just let them do it, or if they're trying to harm somebody else, just, I'm not saying let them do it. I'm saying I'm not talking about inaction, but I'm talking about accepting the situation that's happening to you and then acting on that. Accept the moment as if you chose it. Now, that's actually quite a profound thing to really actually, bring into your life, to actually live. But in fact, if you're living in the moment, it's actually not. And when you actually try it out, for example, if something happens to you that is really inconvenient, you can start with small things. Instead of getting really upset about it, accept that sort of event and that incident as if you'd actually chose it. And then when you have that attitude towards it, even if it's something small, I find sometimes I'm a little bit odd this way. Big things, really big traumatic events, I can accept much more than sometimes small things that sort of are really inconvenient. But I've noticed now, I hope you don't take this as suddenly that I'm all sorted or anything and that I'm doing just fine and I don't have any problems. Not at all. Sometimes I'll get quite annoyed about something or quite irritated, and fortunately, when you see yourself actually, if you're progressing with this living in the moment, you can actually have almost like you're looking at yourself getting really irritated. And that's actually an awareness in itself. You're not completely functioning on an unconscious level. So just having practiced this kind of trying to be in the moment, like he says, and not thinking all the time about the future and the past and just not thinking, that's actually, I think, helped me be a lot calmer person, and I don't get so reactive about things. Like I noticed, for example, I started to notice that I wasn't being so reactive when I went to this shop, it's like down at the local tip, and there was something that I had put aside. It wasn't anything expensive or anything. In fact, it was this old bucket from, it was sort of like a few decades old, like, how they used to have sort of these really strong steel buckets that had for mops, and they had the rollers and everything. And I wanted an old style bucket. I didn't want to buy a plastic bucket. I wanted to buy these buckets that last and last. And I put it aside, and it was only, they were only going to charge me like $4 or $5 or something for it. But you never see them, around here anyway. And I put it at the desk, and I was going to go back and get a couple of other things and come back, and then somebody had taken it. And probably, say, a few years ago, I might have been quite upset about that and felt quite annoyed, and a bit sort of put out. But I sort of thought, oh, okay, and I just sort of, I thought, okay, well, and then I thought, oh, well, I hope they enjoy that bucket. I hope they get enjoyment out of it and they sort of can find it useful. That's the sort of thing I mean. It's like after a while, things, when you're living in the moment and you're just accepting situations because the resistance causes suffering. And once again, I'm not talking about being a doormat or anything like that. I'm just talking about, a sort of a accepting of things as they're happening. It actually helps you be less reactive because you kind of flow through things and things don't become things aren't such a big deal. And I don't know, it just makes things more the equanimity. It makes things less volatile. And that's a good thing. And I think, if we can transform our lives to some extent and also make our lives much less stressful in these very stressful times, I think that's a good thing for all of us, because then, that whole thing, something about this quote, peace is the way, I think it is. You can't seek peace, peace is the way, meaning that if we're all kind of trying to be peaceful in ourselves and non-violent and all of that, then having hateful thoughts towards others, no matter who they are, if we can try and do that, then that creates peace in the world, and that affects others, even if we're not talking about it. Just our demeanor and our being in the world creates a peace. So, we can strive for peace, in actions of education and doing mutual aid and doing protests and all that kind of thing, but we don't hold hatred in ourselves, and we don't want to, be violent towards people, and we are peace, sort of thing, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I hope I didn't sound. I'm far from that in myself. Like I'd say probably 70%, 65% of the time or 70% of the time I might be doing okay. And then there's times where I'm irritated and stuff like that. But it's all, it's all sort of all about the present moment. It's not seeking to be that way. There's not an end point to it. It's right now. Every moment that's the success, is right now. There is no end point, means to an end. This is it right now. So there's no way of failing, really. You can't fail at this. It's like what you're doing at this moment that is important. There's nothing to strive for. It's here right now. So anyway, and maybe one day I'll talk more about Eckhart Tolle's thing. I might go through parts of the book and talk about some things that I found, particularly like, for example, the first book, The Power of Now, has a lot of such profound things in it, and yet it's all talking about the same thing. The whole book is about really one thing, and yet it's got all these different ways of talking about it. It's great. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining my channel if you're new, and if you've been here a while, thank you very much for joining in on various live streams and whatever. And I look forward to your company this year, 2022. So till next time, peace and much love to you. Bye for now.